I don't know. I've got to say I'm kind of anti-physical events. I love the physical events. I love going to them. It's a good time. You get everyone together. It's super fun. And like for fan interaction and that sort of thing, I think it's amazing because obviously, you know, doing YouTube or streaming is a pretty solitary thing a lot of the time. So being able to actually go to physical events and be like, wow, you know, it's actually real people that watch this stuff is super cool. And, you know, you always come back a little bit tired the next week. It's, you know, I feel like I kind of need to go on a detox this week, to be honest. But I do think that, I don't know, I just don't know if I really see the big benefits in doing physical events. Maybe from like a branding or a perception perspective, but in terms of actual profitability or what it really does for the viewership, I don't think it moves the needle at all. You know, like we're at the Fortnite event on the weekend and maybe there's 1,500 people there in person watching, but they've got 40,000 people watching online. And you think about how expensive it is and how much organization it is to get everyone there, put on these events.
Have a stadium.
Oh, it's insane. And for what, 1,500 people? I mean, it's fun. It's great. But like the cost per view online is just not even on the same scale. It's so much, and it's so much more scalable when it's all online.
Yeah, it's super interesting because like when I'm like, oh, do you think esport live events are good? If I think about my personal experience with them, I love them because, you know, like you were saying, I get to go, I get to meet fans, I get to hang out with, you know, people who I mainly just play games with online. It's a great atmosphere. It's a great vibe. You know, there's normally parties, there's fun events happening. You might win some prize money. Like, it's fantastic for me objectively as a content creator. But yeah, it's really just the business side once again where I
don't get it.
It's insane to me because you think about the, you know, probably 100 staff minimum working on that event. They have to get 100 computers. They're renting out one of the biggest, or, you know, they're giving the space of one of the biggest stadiums in Melbourne during the middle of the Australian Open. So not like they've got nothing else to put on there.
It's not a casual Tuesday.
It's a big thing. And you know, which is really, really cool. But then, you know, just the cost behind everything, the production, you've got all these people who are filming, casting, managing the event, just absolute insane amounts of money pouring in from every single direction. And ultimately, if you look at the difference between if it was a live event versus if it was running online, it is hard to see the direct return. But I mean, it's always also one of those interesting things where marketing, I know, values live, like, kind of engagements, like people who actually are present at a thing so much more. Same with like E3. Like, I don't know how much all the people listening to this know about E3, but where basically the big gaming conference happens once a year, you get these companies coming in, and the cost to put on a lot of the booths that like these companies will do at E3 is in the millions of dollars. They'll spend, you know, $3 million on one of the big booths, or probably even more, I think, for stuff like Nintendo. And, you know, the total number of people who get through that event is about 50,000. Say half of them come and visit your booth, which would be a pretty good number considering that, you know, there's so much to see. People don't get to every booth.
Yeah.
You're spending $4 million on 25,000 people, which quick math can't really do it right now. It's expensive per person. And even if every one of those people goes and buys your game, you're still losing money. Anyway, live events, yeah, very interesting. But bringing it back to esports, I think the reason we wanted to talk about it today is because there's been a really big push over recent years of every big company really trying to go towards those live events, which is super interesting. And obviously, I feel like with that number of people, there must be some reason behind it, which is what I'm keen to delve into. But you've got, you know, initially, obviously, events like what we just did at the Australian Open, where Fortnite is doing it. And then, for those who don't know, basically Blizzard, what they're really trying to pioneer with Call of Duty and Overwatch, where they've created the Call of Duty League and the Overwatch League, they've made their teams really kind of city-based. So it's not just like what you have in other esports where it's like TSM and Liquid and whatever kind of names you want. They're like, it is the like Chicago Bulls, or, you know, I don't know the actual
NBA.
Yeah. But, like, they're basically city team names exactly like the NBA, though. They're trying to do it exactly like traditional sports, where you have these teams that then fly to other cities, and that's what they're doing for the Overwatch League this season. Every week, I believe, or at least a lot of weeks, they're going to have one team from one city fly to another city to compete in that city and have, like, the whole home and away team thing going on, which to me is, once again, crazy how much money is just going into this.
Yeah, to me, I don't buy it. I don't buy this city-based team thing. Someone proved me wrong. I look forward to being proved wrong, but it was tried in Australia last year and it just didn't hit. And for me, I think the whole benefit, the whole incredible thing about gaming is it literally doesn't fucking matter where you are. It doesn't matter. It's why it's so amazing that you can do it all digitally. And that's why I'm surprised. I just don't think people care that much about supporting a city-based team, especially when most of the players from these teams aren't necessarily hailing from there or heralding from there, you know?
I guess you could say the same about traditional sports,
True. Very true.
Because to me, I like the city-based teams thing, or at least I'm not against it. I think it's actually a cool new take. I just question the viability of flying teams back and forth between cities to compete each week, because, I mean, you've got the team, which is, 6 to 10 people when you include backup players. Then you've got the coaches. Then you've got the support staff. Then you've got, I mean, I'm assuming there's a huge number of other people who need to move. You then need to build these stadiums in each city. You need to keep those stadiums ticking along. You need to have full dedicated broadcast teams for each stadium. Like, the cost is insane. And I know for a fact...
They get like 40,000 concurrents.
Yeah. Number one, the online viewership is it's significant, but it seems like a huge amount of investment when, you have individual streamers who will pull 30 to 40K concurrents.
I think it relies on having teams that all have really, really good quality players, because I think, and maybe this is where Australia went wrong, but Australia didn't necessarily have the quality of players in every city. And I just think people got to the point where it was like, they don't necessarily care about supporting the Sydney team if the Sydney team is like the 45th and 47th best players playing against each other. They can go on Twitch and see the best number 1 and 2 playing against each other whenever they want. So it doesn't hold that sort of significance that maybe traditional sports do.
I mean, for me, I think the more interesting thing, what I'd love to see, and where I actually think, I mean, maybe it'll end up going, is kind of a bit more of a middle ground. I don't totally discount the value of live events. Like, I think live events probably actually do have a little bit of potential, but I think the problem is right now people are trying to just build this huge thing before there's really any foundation, Everyone's trying to go from literally there being almost no real big IRL viewership events to suddenly, like, we're renting out the biggest stadiums in LA and New York and putting on these giant things.
This is the NBA.
This is the NBA. And it's like, okay, I actually think a more interesting middle ground step there is, instead of, flying teams to verse each other locally, I think you could run the events online, because realistically, and I know that, you're going to have pro players kick up a fuss when you say it, but realistically, if you can get that ping level down to, say, like 20, which you can most of the time in kind of localized state games, then it really doesn't have too much of a competitive impact. And I think the more interesting thing, and what I would love to do, and something I think I would get behind, is if I knew that, there was a team I supported who played in my city, I would 100% go and watch them, like, play live and just have, like, a really casual setting where, it's a bit more laid back. It's not the two teams facing off with this huge production quality. It's just like they're there in the room, they're playing. I've got a few friends who are watching the game, having a beer, like creating a much more, almost like a night out at the bar kind of atmosphere.
Yeah,
just because I think some of my favorite watching live esports experiences I've had is which is when you don't even have the teams present, but it's when you're at like a gaming bar, like those bars that just put on esports tournaments, and you're sitting there with friends, you're watching the game, you're having a good time, and I think that's especially when a lot of esports tournaments run for a really long time. It's not like a basketball match that'll go for how long do basketball matches go for? I don't actually watch them, but like an hour and a half. A lot of like Dota, Fortnite, when they do 6 games for a tournament, like it'll run for 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be real. I don't want to sit in an audience waving a little like Go Team Atlanta flag for 6 hours. I want to be sitting back with my friends, having a beer, being like, oh my God, dude, you see that play? And then being able to just turn down and, look at my phone for a little bit. Just, I think that more casual, laid back live esport event would be a much more interesting thing.
Yeah. I think sometimes there seems to be this desire to really make esports just like traditional sports, but gaming. And I think it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. You can look at them as two different things and get the inspiration from traditional sports, but also do it in a way that's new. Like you create a whole new viewing experience where it's not necessarily like you're going to a huge stadium. It might look different. But anyway, I guess time will tell.
But you can see the reason why the industry's evolved that way. It's because the people who control all the money, I mean, obviously not all of them, but a large number of the people who are financing stuff like the Overwatch League teams and the Call of Duty League teams, obviously with some notable exceptions like FaZe, who obviously comes from a very gaming background, but a lot of the big investors who like bought teams and, those like billionaires out of America and China, they're people who also own like NBA teams, or at least are a lot more familiar with that. So if you go to someone and you're like, hey, we want $50 million, and you pitch them some totally out of left field, like people are going to play and some people watch them live and have some chill beers, like they can be like, I don't get it. But if you go to someone with 50 and say, hey, we want $50 million, it's the NBA, but it's video games. And they're going to be like, oh my God, I get it.
Yeah.
And like video games are getting big, which is, doing nothing but going up. And, wanting to be at the forefront of that, adapting that to a format they understand, that is the way to get investment. And I don't think that it's like the way they're going right now is inherently so wrong. I just think it's going, you're going to find a bit more of a balance between this like full NBA level experience where you've got Marshmello and DJ Khaled at the Overwatch World Cup finals, like coming out and giving a really interesting performance. I think it's going to be like that doesn't need to be what esports is. And I think hopefully, not that would be a bad thing, but I think right now people are trying to force it into that category of being exactly like the NBA, but video games. And I think in reality, it'll probably find a nice middle ground, because ultimately, like, gamers don't necessarily always want to go out and sit in a stadium for 3 hours to watch their favorite people play.